Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm doing a first impressions of S.T.A.L.K.E.R the board game from Awakened Realms. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is a 1 to 4 player campaign-driven game which you're going to be across 8 to 12 hours going through the S.T.A.L.K.E.R video game translated as a board game. There'll also be a single-shot mode if you're looking for a 2 to 3 hour just single-shot experience, and of course this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the Gamefound campaign down below. And speaking of Gamefound, strong disclaimer here, I work for Gamefound, and Gamefound does have shared ownership with Awakened Realms, meaning the between Awakened Realms and Gamefound, different companies, but there is shared ownership, and take that into account as I am reviewing a game that is both on the Gamefound platform and from Awakened Realms directly. This is not going to be a review, I'm not going to have an official rating, I will have thoughts and opinions throughout, given my experience with the game, but definitely if my biases here are something that are a concern to you, if you don't think that you'll get a fully transparent opinion, then this is not the video for you. There are a bunch of other videos you can check out. One Stop Co-op Shop had a great playthrough, as well as his own first impressions at the end, and there are a bunch of other channels that have a variety of content on the game if this is not a video for you. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into the actual video, talk about the game, my experience with it so far, the things I liked, didn't like, the usual stuff, first impression, lots of opinions. I will have plenty of opinions here. I'm just going to hold off on a rating, both because of the fact that it is it's a prototype that is only partial experience of the gameplay, and my relationship with Awakened Realms and Gamefound as well. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into the game. This is a stealth-based tactical shooter kind of situation going on here. There's a bunch of things going on, and the game is a mix of stealth and just general skirmish mechanics. It is a cooperative experience. You're going to be going through a series of adventures. This particular prototype over here only has the first 2 adventures to go through. I don't know how long the full campaign is going to be, but we only have the first 2 missions to dive into in these little fun little boxes which you can set them up and explore. And I have set up over here the first mission, so I have it literally for the setup of the first mission, so no spoilers or anything going on here past the stuff that you would really go through on its own, and I'll be avoiding any spoilers. Even though this is prototype, I'll be avoiding any spoilers as I go through things. But basically, you're going to have your characters. You're going to have your stalkers in the game. I have it set up over here with 3 characters over here right now with their boards and their player stuff, and we have our characters, and we have their items over here, their weapons, their ammo, their defense over here, all their various gear and items, as well as the size things they have in the backpack, their action tokens, all the stuff that's going on as far as the character management of the game. And in the game, you're going to be going through this campaign experience. You're going to have this map over here, and again, lots of stuff are proof of concept here. Lots of stuff are still being developed, the nature of being a prototype, but we're going to have our map over here that is a nice little fun little hand-drawn map. And let's go ahead and focus over here in this bottom corner, because you can see right now that on this map there's one mission available. This mission 101 over here is the first mission. We have to rescue S.T.A.L.K.E.R from whatever things he's gotten himself into. This is a fun little hand-drawn map. It's again a very visual of people writing and drawing whatever they need, having notes in there. And one of the things that's particularly fun, very minor spoilers here, but as you go through the game, you're gonna have stickers that you're putting down onto the map. And the stickers, one of my favorite things is, as you accomplish, let's say, the first mission, you're gonna go ahead and cross off and scribble off rescue S.T.A.L.K.E.R is now gone, and you now have that mission, that sticker, to replace that specific area on the map. So you're kind of replacing areas of the map with kind of hand-drawn notes. You scribbled off the mission and you added your own thing. You're gonna add other locations as you discover them, but it all has this idea that this is a living parchment, which I really enjoy this part overall in general, just the living parchment idea of it as you try to scribble things off, go through the map and all of that stuff there. But then from there, you're navigating around the map, you choose your mission, you go through the first mission, at which point you have your little campaign book. And this is a small little pamphlet thing. I don't know if it's meant to be larger or not. I like the size of it the way it is now. It works really well as far as giving you that kind of exploratory aspect through it. But you're going to open up the campaign book over here and start reading things as you go. And I'll briefly read this first thing. What? You want me to tell you a story tonight? I sigh and toss a log in the fire. My signet, honestly, I want to skip that page. It's not as much fun. Let's see. Let's go through the hatch of the bunker. So one night, I'm trudging through some swamps, God knows where. My shoes are wet, mosquito bites itch like hell, and my patience is running thin. Anomalies flicker all around. Nasty place. Suddenly, a huge structure emerges from the dark. A warehouse, probably. I've never seen it, and I feel chills running down my back, because it means I got lost. Anyway, I crawl up to feel things out when a mighty roar shatters the air and the ground begins to tremble. A huge, violent mutant brute emerges out of nowhere to charge. There's no time to open fire. I run like crazy, the thing's still after me. I can practically smell its fetid breath. And then this fellow appears, waving and yelling something out of a bunker. I have no choice but to follow. And you're going to go through this whole thing. There's a lot of text going on here, and honestly, from the experience that I've had so far, I felt this is decently engaging. But you're going to go through, read the pages, go through the story, until eventually you get to this setup of the scenario. At that point, you're going to to go through your character setup. You're going to grab your mission boxes over here. That's going to be the little box over here. You'll grab the various notes out. They have a whole how to set the scenario. They have all the stuff you need in here, the various cards, and these scenario cards you're going to go through that you're going to have the various map tiles, but not just the map tiles. You're going to have these little overlays that go onto the board. So you're going to have a general map, but then specifics as to the missions you're going through and what you have to engage with, kind of giving you a degree of exploration. If you've played some of these Zombicide campaigns, this concept of like, overlaying cards into the board will be very familiar to you. I'm sure a bunch of other games, it's just the one that comes to mind, but they have those kind of situations on the board. So this map tile that might be used in other missions is currently dealing with the unique situation that you have in front of you as far as the things you're trying to explore, the secrets you'll discover, the various things that will pop in as you go. But you go through all that in this campaign book, and then you start the actual sequence where it kind of treats us as the clock of the game. The clock of the game, giving you some narrative text, the events that happen, any rules adjustments, the end of turn cleanup you're going to go through, and you're going to have the slow clock that slowly goes through. I'll avoid flipping through this too much to avoid spoilers, but this gives you the narrative event of what's happening. You go through a round of play where you have your characters that'll be activating, trying to wander around this map and trying to accomplish your goals, which will vary and sometimes won't necessarily be 100% clear. Like right now we have this kind of vague idea that we have to rescue S.T.A.L.K.E.R, which you'll find out more about why and who he is and all those things as you go through this. And again, you can watch a bunch of the playthroughs out there if you want to spoil a little bit at the cost of getting a better, well, the cost of spoiling a little bit, but getting a better sense of the gameplay and what you'll encounter as you go through this experience. And so you're going to wander around the map trying to accomplish your goals, but also trying to explore and deal with what's going on. You might have to deal with the various anomalies, because anomalies are one of the fun parts of the game that give you both a situation you have to engage with and encounter, but also the possibility of discovering fun, cool little things from the artifact decks or extra items or just stuff that you'll get, but you have to kind of engage with it to some degree, or alternatively trick your opponents, the enemies, to actually engage with it. Speaking of the opponents and enemies, one of the things that's interesting about the game that I enjoy is the fact that not all enemies are out for you. You're going to have a bunch of bandits in the board over here, and these bandits are going to be dealing with you. Yes, they consider you a threat, but they also consider a variety of the other things that show up in the game a threat. This big guy over here, this big guy is not just threatening to you, he's threatening to every single person who he's trying to take out, and so the enemies, the bandits, will have to focus and deal with him if and when he's on the board, if he's on the board, the when he's on the board, and all those fun things. You have that aspect of the enemies engaging with each other, and enemies, the enemy types are important, so you won't have bandits shooting each other, but you may have bandits shooting the various things that are trying to kill everyone around you. Meanwhile, you're dealing with your action economy system. This is where you have your own player board, you have your action system over here, where you have a large action and small action, as well as certain bonuses that go on those actions. And that's going to affect the types of actions you have access to. So your player board is going to have their own specific actions, how you move, whether you sprint, whether you're running around. You're going to have your weapons that have lighter and stronger actions as well, just defining how effective they are in the game. And weapons, speaking of weapon actions over here, the way weapons work in the game, it's a very different system than you might be used to, a whole different system. What you're going to be doing is you're going to have these enemies over here, and these enemy cards have the stats of the enemy on them. And so, for example, we have the head and torso areas over here. And the way that works is when you're choosing to shoot the head of the enemy, and not all the time do you have the choice. It depends on what weapon action you're taking. Sometimes you have that agency. Other times, if you don't, you're just going to hit the torso of the enemy. But you're going to have that opportunity to try to take that headshot, which has a stronger possibility of getting that instant kill, but is also harder to hit. And so you have that risk-reward aspect to it. But then past that, where and how you deal with them, whether you're fighting off a bandit or whether you're fighting off that giant guy over here, the Sudo, I do not know how to pronounce it, unfortunately. But you have the torso here, you have the weak spot, whether you're able to actually take them out and flip them over and deal with that. You're going to have these enemies over here, and if, again, whether or not you just pin them down or whether you actually deal a wound to them or take them out, those are going to depend on where you shoot and how well you hit. So hitting someone in the torso is much more likely. Your chances of pinning them down is very, very strong. It's very easy to get someone off your back by shooting them in the chest. You may or may not kill them, that's a different conversation, but it's very easy to get them off your back. Versus shooting them in the head is much harder, but if you do hit, if you lock that in, you get that instant kill. But it's an interesting paradigm shift to actually work your head around, because, head pun intended, pun not intended there, but in the sense that very often you'll be having to choose whether you need to take somebody out or whether you want to take just make sure that they're not on your case, because you're almost guaranteed. The idea that you can constantly hit an enemy and they don't have a health tracker that's slowly moving down, but rather you just have the consistent chance of killing them if you're not getting those headshots in. That's an interesting paradigm shift to adjust to if you're used to other games. It's a very different system than what I've usually seen in games in terms of how you actually deal with and engage the enemies. But again, you're also going to be dealing with those large and small actions for different things, and you have to take into account those bonuses, by the way, because you might have the ability to get an extra success when you take that shot, or possibly to re-roll your dice. You have those extra benefits, plus the additional movement that you get before taking an action. You have the ability to, like, line yourself up where you need to go, but then also to move one more space to peek around the corner right before you shoot someone. Or alternatively, line yourself up, shoot, and then retreat. You have those options on the table because of the fact that each action has an extra movement built into it as you go. Meanwhile, you have a ton of gear to deal with as well. You have the adrenaline shot Borsuk has, one of my favorite ones over here, that just straight up lets you take your actions again. You just have a full turn cycle again, which can be incredibly impactful if you use it at the right time. You have all kinds of grenades, from flashbangs to stun grenades to smoke grenades to general grenades that'll just deal damage to them. But you're dealing with a lot of tactical maneuvering and management in the game system, because you're constantly going to be generating noise in the game. In general, as you wander around the board, as you take an action to, like, let's say Milady over here takes a sprint action, using her large action over here, running across the board, she might go over here and move over here, and she might use that extra movement before or after, which means she gets a full 4 movement if she needs, and she's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. But as you do so, you're going to have to be mindful of the fact that whenever you sprint, you take noise tokens equal to how far you moved, although you are limited to 3 of each type per square, and she's going to put 3 noise tokens in her space that gives a reason for the enemies to engage with her, regardless of what happens next. But additionally, because she moved past the line of sight of enemies' line of sight is going to be their front and then their sides, but not their rear. But nonetheless, she moved past their line of sight. We're also going to have to put a large noise token into her spot, and now that means it's 2 noise plus the other 3 from here. There's 5 noise in her spot, which means the enemies on the board have a lot of incentive to be able to get to her spot. This enemy over here, when they take their turn and their actions, that enemy has 1, 2, 3, 4 away, and so they're going to close the distance on them, as will these others. And this one's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one's also 5 away. So all these enemies are going to be closing in on you when you're dealing that much noise, and you have to tactically manage that as you go through the game system. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm laughing at all of you because I'm about to take a pot shot at the enemy, so I'm just going to do that one more shot anyways, although there are ways to mitigate and manage around it. For example, what I could do instead is I could only move over here, where I'm only going to move 3 spaces, and still put that over here. But then I can go ahead and take my other action, generating 1 extra success, but also moving 1 more distance, so I can pop over there in order to be able to go ahead and take 1 more shot, and this time deal with my weapon over here, where I'm going to go ahead and roll 2 red dice, going for a headshot. I'm specifically going to go for a headshot, spend 1 ammo, taking 1 ammo off this board over here, and then rolling 2 red dice over here, put 2 noise on my space. So now there's 4 noise on this space, and 5 noise on this space, but because I've split it up, I may have avoided the further enemies from actually engaging with me. Going ahead and rolling, and we got, boom, that's perfect, because what happens over here is I got the 1 extra success from this one over here. This is actually a beautiful shot. I wish this had happened to me when I actually played the game. Did not go nearly as well for me. But over here, you're going to have these shots over here. This is 5 successes over here. We targeted the head, and that needs a 7 successes to hit. We get +1 from action token, but also we're shooting them from the rear. When you shoot someone from the rear, you get an extra success. So that's 7 successes, which means he's gone, and I don't have to worry about him anymore. My life just got a little bit easier. I say a little bit easier because everyone is still hunting me down, and I have 1 action left as far as what to do. So maybe I go ahead and use this action token over here, flip it face down, and wander into the anomaly over here, flipping the cards. And I'm going to avoid that because I don't want to spoil things for you too much. But you might have to then step into the anomaly, flip some cards, and start drawing from the anomaly bag over here as far as grabbing the tokens you need to figure out what's going to happen with you. Are you going to take damage, radiation? Are you going to actually be able to unlock various things from the anomaly? The anomalies represent these fascinating opportunities to discover things in the game. And so you're dealing with this action economy system, and when all the players are done with that, the enemies will go ahead and activate. Enemies will shoot you effectively if you're in line of sight. If they actually have the opportunity to shoot you over here, they're just straight up going to shoot you. And you can go ahead and look at their range. The Bandit AK-47s over here, they have 4 range. We have the shotguns have 3 range. And you track range by just looking, again, their direct line of sights and the direct straightness. You can just track it. It's a little interesting to go through it. But for example, this person with range 4 over here, because they have the AK-47, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's also 1, 2, 3, 4. And that, I think, where we go there, we can go this way, we can go 1, 2, 3, but you have these interesting opportunities to try to create these interesting kind of diagonals. These little orange lines are going to block line of sight, so we can't go through them. Those are the buildings and the structures, but you will have interesting moments of how line of sight actually is measured as you try to track through them. But effectively, it's straight lines on the sides, both sides, and the forward, and trying to be mindful of just counting straight out there and possibly seeing whether they see you or not, which you could have interesting situations where you kind of sometimes are in line of sight-ish, but like if you're looking diagonally, but the nature of the way they track it won't always give you that direct line of sight. It usually works out pretty consistently. There are occasional moments where you're like, I feel you should see me, but you don't. Now, if they can't see you and shoot you, then they're going to go ahead and track their movement across the board. Instead, they're going to follow the noise. I don't know why I said track movement. They're going to follow the noise effectively. You're going to have those piles of noise that will attract people within their range. So the more noise you generated, you may have gotten more done, but you also have more people slowly chasing you down. And you also have to be mindful because various tokens over here, there's going to be tokens in these huts over here in different ways, and these tokens you can try to peek into a hut on your turn to try to discover what's in here and possibly flip some cards. But alternatively, if they're within noise range of any bundles of tokens, they're going to flip over and you're going to see what generates over there. You may have to generate more enemies or more people to deal with that pop into the cabin that are suddenly going to be, you know, more stuff. You may have just got a headshot on somebody and you may be feeling all good about yourself, but suddenly if 2 more people generate and you still have to deal with them, it's a whole different puzzle to manage. And so you're trying to manage what you do, who you affect, who you draw into your circle of energy, while being mindful that there is a clock going on. Going back to this journal over here, things are happening as you go. This is not a static board. You are walking around. You are dealing with the enemies. You are engaging with the anomaly. You're peeking at the various cards. You're engaging, again, there's all these cards. I don't know how you can see it, but there's basically cards all over the board that are very nicely overlaid. But there's like 7 or 8 cards on the board, and these cards all represent something you can explore and discover. But as you do so, as the turn cycle ends, you're flipping through the journal at the same time, trying to be mindful of the fact that there's also things happening from here. So there's a clock on the game that's going to introduce more stuff to you as you go through it. And you're going through that cycle all while trying to accomplish your goals until eventually you either fail and then potentially just replay the mission. If you straight up fail, you just there's a cute little thing aspect to it. There's a cute little aspect where it's like, hey, that's not how I remember the story, and then you can replay through it. It's just visually, it's a nice little concept. You still have to replay the mission. This is not fail forward. This is a game. If you do not accomplish your goals, you'll have to replay the mission, but you don't lose the progress. From what I can see, at least, it's mission by mission. There's no like, oh my gosh, restart the campaign. You're gonna be going through that. Now, when you're done with all that, there's going to be different things going on. Again, you have these various stickers you're going to be potentially putting on various elements. You're also going to have this script book over here. This is a book over here which has some elements I haven't really engaged with, so I don't have a full sense of various elements of the binder, like creating your own Stalker team. You'll also be able to save your items here, so you don't have to figure out which pile things are. This is where your items will be as you go through it. But then you also have these scripts that you'll be dealing with. And again, I don't want to ruin things for you, so I'll be very vague as to what goes on here, but in between missions you'll have the opportunity to engage with certain scripts. Going back to this map over here, so just to give you, this part will be minimally spoiler over here, but over here you have these various scripts on the board and you have the opportunity to engage with them in between missions. When you do so, you'll flip over your scripts binder and you'll start making choices, and those choices can be as simple as, you know, hey, you talked to somebody and you got this new armor card that's super cool, but also you'll have various things that have chaining pathways of how you engage with the world around you, choice and consequence, and possibly getting more things sometimes, but being a bad person, or being a good person, getting less things, but possibly having an impact that will last down the road as you engage with the various people in this world around you. Stickers will go on the map, people will get to know you, and you will, of course, level up your characters throughout the game. Both in the game itself, things will happen, you'll find stuff, but also as you go through that. Speaking of finding stuff, one thing that's going to happen is every mission pack comes with this giant stack of cards. And this stack of cards over here, not giant stack of cards, a stack of cards. And they're going to be some of the cards that go on the board, the various mission setup, the anomalies you have over here, some of the things going on as far as your mission objectives, you know, find and rescue S.T.A.L.K.E.R, escape from the bandit camp, but also things that I will avoid showing you. I'm about to start scrolling through this, and I will not shuffle through this over here, but various things you'll have that will be happening, new cards that go on the map, stuff you can discover, various events or enemies or things. This is a strong sense of exploration to what you're doing as you go through this, and combined with the timer slowly ticking down you, this gives you a mission that balances stealth, it balances action management, it balances a ton of items you have to deal with, it balances your own little active Geiger counter that tracking your radiation, because very often there are things in the game that will give you radiation, either because of choices, you know, choosing to wander through a spot that gets you where you need faster, but at the cost of radiation. Choosing to engage with the anomalies will often have a lot of radiation coming your way, and this will slowly tick down until eventually you just slowly move up until you start rolling dice and possibly taking damage because of how engaged you are with the radiation around you, rolling more and more and more dice and just taking wounds slowly but surely until you eventually die. Meanwhile, you're also being mindful of your armor, because armor is going to let you roll these blue defensive dice over here, and if you can outpace the enemy's attack, that's a decent but not the best roll over there. It's actually really tolerably okay. You may be able to ignore the wounds, but if you don't ignore the wounds, where's my wound deck? My wound deck over here, you'll be dealing with various wounds over here that have a large degree of variety to both the actual physical wounds they have and how they engage with you, or also alternatively the various radiation damage you're going to be dealing with in the game, and these just have a large variety, so no two wounds are created equal. What you actually have happen to you, this can be a system that's a little reminiscent of ISS Vanguard if you've played through that, a little reminiscent of that, while being very much its own thing. That's a lot of information, a lot of stuff to cover. The game will have a single shot mode. I don't know much about how that's going to play out. What I've played through here in these two scenarios very much feels like a campaign experience. It feels like a world you're engaging with and a degree of stuff you're uncovering and exploring, and different ways you can interact with scenarios in front of you, but still with a degree of, well, we'll talk about things like replayability shortly, and I think now's a good time to move into opinions. There's a lot of stuff I covered today, and a whole lot more I didn't. This game is very involved, and there's a lot of rules to engage with, how everything operates. Hopefully you got a general sense of things, or alternatively you're skipping here because you don't really care about how to play, and you just jumped here to talk about the things I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. And there's a lot that I like, but also complaints, a lot of things, we'll get into them as well. But starting off, in terms of general production values, this is Awakened Realms. I expect the production values to be incredibly good, with a caveat. I do have a caveat we'll get to later. But in general, you know, these miniatures look great. I've played the S.T.A.L.K.E.R video game a long time ago. I didn't play it, like, I never finished the whole game. I remember diving into it for several hours, and I don't know much about the... I don't remember enough about the game to talk about how well this mimics that experience, but I can tell you that the world building is great, the theme is great, the characters feel in depth, the story I've been going through there so far, from what little I've experienced from the 2 missions there are, it does pull you in. That sense of timing as far as how the mission progresses, it feels like this world is alive around you. It really does. This is not simply a mission, this is a mission with things happening as you go through it. You are doing your best to survive, but the world is changing as you go through it, and it's a very engaging puzzle to go through, both in terms of what you have to actually manage as you play it, but also in terms of the stuff happening. This is, again, it starts, I don't want to spoil things for you. If you've watched the playthrough on any of the channels that are doing a playthrough, you'll already know some of the things I'm talking about, but things change. You walk into this mission thinking it's one thing, and before you know it, it's very much something else as you go through it, in the sense of the things you unlock and discover, and how the environment changes around you as you go through it. And that continues as you go through the missions. The 2 missions I've gone through over here, it gives you that sense of a world that's alive around you. The narrative and evolution of what's happening is very present and very engaging, very rewarding, and I love the map system of how you stick stickers on this map and how it gives you that sense of drawing and writing on your own map. The way you engage with this feels immersive as you go through it, and I love that aspect of when you have a mission on the map, you have rescue S.T.A.L.K.E.R over here, and then you finish that and it scribbles it off. That's what it does. It has someone scribbling it off and being like, okay, we found him, next, and you put new stickers on, you engage with the world around you as you go through that. I love that map evolution. I like the mix of combat and stealth management in the game to an extent. I don't know how... I haven't really fully watched the One Stop Club Shop playthrough or any other, so I don't know how differently people have gone through these experiences, but I can tell you that there's a lot of noise management in the game. That's something that's going to give you that sense of stealth. If you've played stealth-based games in the past, this will have that sense of it's not purely a run and gun. You are certainly trying to manage your impact in the space around you and trying to be mindful of who's going to chase you down based on how you operate. I can also tell you that I certainly feel like I've had to shoot my way around at times. This is not a game that's the nature of the closed space on the board over here. Doesn't feel like you can really properly avoid people. Because, I mean, you can try. If you start off, if you're willing to burn through your equipment early on, maybe you can throw a flashbang there, block your line of sight there. There might be more ways to mitigate. But the map is small enough, and the things you have to explore in this makes me feel that it's hard to get into this without engaging in spoilers. But I'll keep it very loose. I'll say that it feels like your options as you go through this are not so much about not engaging with enemies, but about possibly choosing when to engage with enemies, because if you can push off when you engage with them, there might be other things for enemies to engage with. There's, trying to be vague, well, not whatever, but there's certainly a degree of noise management and stealth management in this game, while very much being a run and gun at the same time. You will have to shoot, you will have to try to land your shots, you will certainly be spending your action tokens, spending your rerolls, and doing what you can to try to figure out how you can just take somebody down with a well-timed shotgun to the back of the head. It will make your life a whole lot easier to not have that enemy on the board. And it doesn't seem like there's enemies that are going to be spawning based on how you do. If you've played games like Assassin's Creed or something like that, or you might have that sense of as you start to become known, more enemies will spawn. That doesn't seem to be the case, at least not based on how I've gone through it. So it certainly is useful to kill people. It's just that you have to be prepared for the fact that, 5 enemies chasing you down at once is a harder puzzle to manage than dealing with 2 enemies here and hoping to keep the rest of them at bay. But I like that mix of combat and stealth management. It feels like you have to be very cautious with what you do, but ultimately you'll also be shooting people and not feeling that much the worse off for it. So I like that overall. There's a ton of fine items to go through in the game. There's tons of loot and items you're going to be starting with. The various mission packs you're going to open are going to give you things that you can spread around your characters, and then there's going to be continued loot you're going to find from the various loot tokens as you explore around the map, and then different things that will unlock both in the missions itself and in between missions, and it is very rewarding to get those extra stuff. It's very rewarding and very fun to get extra gear in the game. It makes you feel powerful as you go through it, and I'm curious how that's going to evolve across the full campaign arc. And I'll also say, speaking of campaign arc, I'll say I'm very happy about the fact that the supposed timeline of this is like an 8 to 12 hour mission, because that makes this a campaign, 8 to 12 hour campaign, because that makes it something that I can actually look at and say, you know what, this month I'm going to play through S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Awakened Realms games are very, very fun, at least the ones I've played through, but their campaign games are certainly an obligation. ISS Vanguard is a game that I've had to play it twice for during the prototype phase, and I've gone through it and I've enjoyed it, but at a certain point you're like, okay, great, when am I ready to sign up for 100 hours of gameplay? And I don't always know when the answer is. And I like the fact that they're offering an 8 to 12 hour campaign experience that gives me something that I will just play that month. Today we're playing S.T.A.L.K.E.R. this month, and then maybe we'll dive back into it again, although we'll have to touch upon replayability before the end of this. But I like that sense of management to it, although taking into account that's based on what they're saying. I have not played through this. I've only played through 2 missions, so that's more just me being excited about the idea of having a campaign I can actually finish. I will say a lot of aspects of the game felt unique, and felt unique in a way that was rewarding and didn't feel like they were trying too hard. Sometimes people try to stick to things. Sometimes people try to do things that are different at the cost of them feeling well done. And I think that S.T.A.L.K.E.R. managed to do a lot of things that felt different, and some of them felt like different but not necessarily better or worse, and others felt well done. I loved the way they dealt with the enemies here. I like that sense of they don't have a health thing, and it's not, and part of the reason I like it is because it's different. I think that it is different, but it's different in a way that worked for me. That idea of going for headshots or just pinning enemies down, and them not that they have a health tracker that you constantly have to manage and deal with, it gives you a strong sense of, again, of different from other games while working within the system. And other things are different too. The action management system is different. The line of sight feels unique. Although line of sight I could take it or leave it. It works for what it does, but it's not necessarily a plus. It just worked for what it does, and there are opportunities where you can feel clever because you manage to avoid line of sight, although they feel clever, but possibly because they also feel like they might not be thematically relevant. But overall, what S.T.A.L.K.E.R. has done so far is it gives me a strong sense of engagement in the story and the way things evolve. And there's also timing things. We haven't really gotten to it, but like there are kind of half completion points where you might have done enough to still win the mission, but not yet done it on the timeline necessary to walk away with a complete win. There's lots of things going on. The game really does immerse you into the world and that sense of evolution as you go through it, while giving you a strong sense of agency of how to puzzle your way through it. Lots of solid things that I really enjoyed from what this prototype has shown me so far. As far as things I don't like in the game, the first thing I'll say is, and this is a prototype, so take it with a grain of salt, but the rules clarity is Awakened Realms prototypes. I've dealt with a few Awakened Realms prototypes by now, and I'll say that their prototype rules are usually not the best. S.T.A.L.K.E.R. is definitely one of those cases as well, where there are times I just made judgment calls. There were times I just moved forward as like, I'm not entirely sure how this works. I'm just going to decide that I did it this way. And they actually have a little note about like, you know, in the rules about like, you know, how to engage with the world if you're uncertain. And yeah, I just have to make judgment calls at times. Not the worst. Again, this is a prototype phase over here, so take that into account. I don't know what the final rules are. I will say that I was able to completely and totally play this from even prototype rules, but yes, with a question or two along the way. I'll also say that replayability might be a drop of a concern. That's going to feed into the nature of the exploring different aspects of this, as well as the whole card pile you're going through. And replayability is not something I usually touch upon. Usually I put replayability in what I can see others not liking, because I'm like, listen, I'm not going to play through a 50-hour campaign twice. But if it's a 12-hour campaign, I do think I want to play through this twice. And so I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, I'm sure they'll have add-ons and other stuff, and by the time you're done with it all, it'll be more. But this is a game system that the campaign length is something more adjacent to Primal or Wild Ascent, something more manageable as you go through it. And to that end, I like this enough that I can see myself wanting to dive back in, you know, a year after I played it and see where it goes. And I think that there is limited replayability to it. Not no replayability, but limited replayability. I'm less entranced by the idea of playing through the same missions again and again, because I kind of know how things play out to a degree, and that takes away a lot of the benefit of the sense of discovery. Now, you won't necessarily engage with everything, so there is that aspect, but you'll engage with enough things that, again, for the same reason I'm avoiding trying to tell you things that happened here, is because I want you to have that sense of discovery if you play through this. If rescuing S.T.A.L.K.E.R. is an actual mission you go through in the final game, I want you to have that sense of discovery as you go through it, and I think that some of the fun things that happen along the way, you will lose on your second playthrough. Is there still stuff to discover? Are there other avenues you can explore? Absolutely, but replayability is a minor concern because they actually made a more manageable campaign size that I'm more interested in. That flip side of that is I'm like, but will I be able to replay it a year later? Maybe, I don't know. I guess I can play it with somebody else and have the sense of discovery of watching them enjoy what happens. Honestly, I didn't even think of that. That kind of does in some way actually improve my opinion there, because I will play it with somebody else and watch them see the things that happen. But there is that replayability concern. It's certainly present, especially because it is a smaller campaign. This is not a skirmish game that you're going to play 2 hours at a time again and again and again and again. You'll play it for 12 hours, and you have to decide, are you interested enough to replay it? Do you have enough reasons to dive back into it? Or do you just need, 3 years to go by? Or alternatively, go all in on this to justify that? There's all these trade-offs there. But I do think, usually I do not put replayability as a concern for me. I put it as a concern for you. In this case, it is a minor concern for me that I'll have to wait and see how it goes. As far as what I can see others not liking, because there's a bunch of stuff over here that might make the game right for you or wrong for you as you go through it. But first of all, token management in the game is not manageable, but it's certainly a bit to go through. You're frequently going to be clearing noise tokens as you go through the game, as you go from turn to turn, but you are going to be placing down a bunch of noise tokens as you go through, and I didn't find the tokens themselves hard to manage, but I did find the constant checking and counting of, okay, that's range 4, that's range 3, they're moving here. There's a lot of management as far as how to activate the characters and how to count the noise tokens and flip over other tokens, that there was a decent amount of it going on. Not a ton, not manageable, but something that if you're looking for like a very, very, very clean system, there's a bunch of tokens to manage as you go through it. You're just going to have to deal with that. It was not overwhelming. It was present as you go through it. I'll also say that the player count concerns is something that I kind of felt as I was going through this, and I double checked this one. I didn't find anything online. I was trying to look for on Board Game Geek or not. Probably should have reached out to Awakened Realms. But from what I can see from the actual documentation of setting things up as you go, there's no modification difference between 2 and 3 players. There is between 1 and 1 player has its own modification, but 2 and 3 doesn't. In terms of the tokens you're going to be flipping over and the enemies you're going to be spawning in the game, there's going to be a difference between 1 player or not, but 2 and 3 isn't. And from what I can see, a 3rd player just gives you a full set of extra actions to go through, which means I played this with 3 characters, and I mean, spoilers, I guess I won the games, but certainly felt the struggle of it, but I definitely won the games. I'm curious to see how that works with 2 and how manageable it is, because it feels like you're just dealing with less stuff to go on your end, but the same degree of enemies. Now, I do chalk this up to prototype. I'm not entirely sure if I followed it correctly. I think I did, but this might be a prototype thing. I assume the final game will be different, but I definitely think from what I went through the game, I definitely feel something's off in terms of the 2 versus 3 players. Again, hopefully just a prototype concern. I'll say that over here, and actually I forgot something in the things I don't like. I'm sorry. And the things I personally don't like, I found this stuff to be useful. The scenery over here was just completely useful. These useless, not useful, useless. These things over here that you put down on the board, and I don't know what the final things will be like in terms of what Awakened Realms has planned for all their premium components and all that stuff. But these things over here on the board, as much as this looks nice over here on the table, and it does look nice, and having it all set up, the first time I played, I tried setting it all up, and I was like, okay, this is great, this looks good. It kind of just blocks access to the cards. It means that when you're flipping cards, you have to pick this stuff up and move it out of the way anyway. And before the game was like more than 10 minutes into it, I had all the scenery stuff completely done and put away. There's fun stuff like this, like these tokens, these miniatures. These I liked a lot more, as like stacking the cool barrels wherever they go, although I wasn't 100% always clear where these actually go on the map or if they have a designated spot. So lots of cool scenery stuff. Wasn't 100% clear of the actual, I guess this over here can probably go over here. That does work, and that's cool. I like that. But again, they have miniatures and scenery stuff. I don't know exactly where and how they're going to work within the systems they have here. I do think the miniature stuff definitely looks a lot better, but the building stuff, it looks good, but it does block your actual, it obfuscates you being able to see and engage with the cards, which means it's a lot of pretty stuff that kind of gets in the way. And so I do want to see where that ends up. I definitely recommend being cautious or mindful as you look at the campaign page and choose what you're going to buy or not. I do recommend being cautious and mindful of what will add to your experience versus what will get in the way of your experience. And then lastly, I'll say again, back to what I can see others not liking. I'll say that there were definitely some logical problems with noise, with line of sight, things that might affect your immersiveness in the experience. The idea that I can manage my noise a little better by like splitting up the noise from here to there and not having it all in the same exact spot, and some of that changes whether the enemies are going to go there. I don't know about you, but if I'm shooting a gun here and a gun here versus twice a gun here, it doesn't change logically what should be happening, but you could play games like that to manage and mitigate noise. To me, I found that it added to the puzzle I have, the sense of a puzzle of how to actually win here, but it's adding to the sense of the puzzle at the cost of the exact logical relevance of it. As far as final thoughts on S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the board game, I overall really enjoyed my experience with it, and this is right in line with other experiences I've had in games like I'll talk about it more in recommendations, but games like Burn Cycle, Assassin's Creed, games like, oh my gosh, what is there's a space one that I really enjoyed. I can't remember the name of it offhand. Darn it, it's going to bother me. But there's all these game systems that have that degree of stealth and combat mixed in that I've overall really enjoyed what they brought to the table, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R does a really good job of fitting into that genre. It does a great job of giving a very different experience. It gives you that campaign stealth aspect, which I guess is a little more similar to Assassin's Creed, but it does so in a way that it really engages you with both the story and the decisions and immerses you into the characters. I felt involved in wanting to kind of figure out what's going on. I've left off on a cliffhanger, and I want to see more of what this world has to offer and who I'm going to be interacting with along the way, to what end, and the various things I'm going to discover, because there is a lot of sense of discovery here. This did a great job of involving me in the narrative of a scenario, the narrative of a campaign, and having a degree of evolution to what's happening around you that was incredibly well done, while also giving me a tactical puzzle to engage with as I go through it. Again, I do have nitpicks, concerns, things like that, and again, the aspect of the stealth versus the running gun versus shooting people. There's all these different things to balance and manage in the game, and there's still areas where prototype versus final game will be cleaned up and things like that. But overall, I found myself really intrigued and involved in what S.T.A.L.K.E.R has to offer in terms of the mechanical decisions and choices I have to make along the way, and the sense of theme and story and evolution that is present in the gameplay. It really felt like a very engaging game that I'm looking forward to diving into the full 8 to 12 hours. And again, to the point that this is one where I genuinely have replayability as one of my bigger concerns, because in terms of how much fun the game was, it was a lot of fun to go through. But I am already concerned that 12 hours, I want to play it again. I want to play it again as I go through it, and I'm curious to see how they're going to manage that in terms of keeping the replayability present, or alternatively relying on other things, such as waiting 3 years or teaching it to a friend to give you that sense of replayability as you go through it. But overall, I really enjoy S.T.A.L.K.E.R the board game. I highly recommend this one if you are someone that has liked any of those other games I've mentioned. And speaking of which, with that, let's go to recommendations. If you like S.T.A.L.K.E.R and want other recommendations, or if you like other games and want to see what's a good fit or match, this to me very strongly felt reminiscent to games like Burn Cycle and Assassin's Creed. Burn Cycle in terms of the general puzzle management, as you eventually could take down characters, but you have to try to figure out how you go through the scenario by scenario, trying to manage your floors and manage your robots and all your gears and your items and abilities. It has a lot of that similar management as you go through S.T.A.L.K.E.R the board game, and a lot of that sense of taking down guards when you can, but not always having the ability to, and trying to manage your noise and your impact and your line of sight, had a lot of those elements. And then similarly Assassin's Creed as well. A sense of evolution of your characters, of getting more gear, of finding more stuff, of dealing with the scenario around you as you try to accomplish your goals and then ultimately get out as you go through it. It had a lot of those similar notes while being very, very different in the mechanical execution of the actual game state. Very, very different games, but all of those have that same note of tactical management combined with stealth, combined with story, that really made these all very solid experiences. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.